horror games with real life ruining legal consequences. Let's see if I've actually played any of these games.
Police raided video game stores. A senator held congressional hearings over a vampire game where you're supposed to save the girls, and one game got banned for showing a kiss between two women. And all of this happened because some people made horror games that scared the wrong person. These are banned horror games with real legal consequences to own. So we're starting in 1986, the year Top Gun came out. The year everyone thought shoulder pads were a good idea. And the year someone at Exidy looked around and said, you know what arcades need? A game where you torture people for points. Meet Chiller. Picture this, you walk into Chuck E. Cheese or some other establishment like it, past the ball pit and the screaming kids. And there's this light gun game sitting next to Pac-Man, except instead of shooting ghosts, you're shooting helpless victims strapped to torture devices for fun. Because apparently someone thought family entertainment needed more medieval dungeon vibes. The game was simple. You had prisoners tied to racks, guillotines, various torture contraptions that would make a medieval execution.
I know this is a stupid thing, but it bothers me when people call it a guillotine. It's like, please pronounce these things correctly. It is a guillotine. I know it's spelled guillotine, but it is pronounced guillotine. I know it's a small stupid thing, but it's one of those things that actually bothers me. If you're going to pronounce something, at least try and pronounce it correctly. It is guillotine.
Executioner proud, and your job, shoot them, not to save them, not to set them free, to literally torture them to death. You got points for blasting off limbs, extra points for heads. The game rewards you for being as creatively sadistic as possible with your gun. Now, here's where it gets weird. This wasn't some underground snuff film. This was an arcade game. You know, the things that are designed to sit in public spaces where families go to have fun. The same place where little Timmy plays skee-ball was supposed to house a torture simulator, because nothing says wholesome entertainment quite like scoring points for dismemberment. The UK took one look at this thing and they said absolutely not. They banned it before you could even make it to arcades. Import operators refused to touch it. The government would have hit them with obscenity laws faster than you could say family fun. Britain was in the middle of their video nasty panic at the time, where they were banning horror movies left and right. So when they saw a game that was basically a torture manual with quarters, they shut that down real quick. But here's the best part. The game had zero plot. No story about why you're doing this. No evil villain to defeat. No princess to save. Just, here's some people tied up, go nuts. Most games at least pretend there's a good reason for the violence. Chiller couldn't even be bothered with that. It was pure, honest torture for entertainment, which when you think about it, it's almost refreshing in its complete lack of care. Even in America, arcade owners looked at this thing and said, yeah, no thanks. Local communities started pressuring places to remove it. Parents complained. Kids probably had nightmares. The game had such a limited run that most people have never even heard of it, which is probably
I didn't even know it existed.
Considering it was designed to teach children that torturing people is a fun way to spend an afternoon. Germany and Italy both took a look at their import regulations and decided Chiller didn't need to exist in their countries either. I guess that's a smart move. Sometimes the best way to handle a problem is to pretend it doesn't exist. Right? But those early torture games were just the warm-up act. Because fast forward to 1995.
I mean, compared to the games we have now, that's basically that's baby stuff compared to the shit we have now. I mean, look at some of the disgusting things we have, like Agony. I mean, that's just, Chiller is just child's play at this point. I mean, if that sort of thing was made today, then yeah, you know what? Nobody would bat a fucking eye. But yeah, I could see the problem it had back in the 1980s. I mean, but nowadays, yeah, it's basically nothing.
Someone decided to turn one of the most disturbing science fiction stories ever written into a point-and-click adventure game, because nothing says fun weekend activity quite like exploring themes of internal torture and human suffering. The game was based on Harlan Ellison's short story about a supercomputer that destroys humanity and keeps 5 people alive just to torture them forever. Cheerful stuff. The game, I have no mouth and I must scream. The game lets you play through each character's personal nightmare. One character gets a haunted house, another goes body horror, and then there's Nimdok, the former Yahtzee scientist who gets to relive his time working in concentration camps. Now, here's where things get interesting. Germany has this law called Section 86A. Sounds boring, right? Well, this law basically says you can't show Yahtzee symbols or propaganda in almost anything, especially games. Makes sense. Nobody wants the national symbol of the Yahtzee party in their entertainment. The law exists for a good reason in Germany. But
Well, the symbol is kind of all over in, what was it called? I have the game. Wolfenstein. That's basically that.
someone at the German rating boards looked at this game and had a problem. The Nimdoc chapter was full of Yahtzee imagery, bad images, concentration camp scenes, the whole horrible package. So they made a decision. They banned that entire chapter from the German release. Just one chapter. Problem solved, right? Wrong. See, here's the thing about adventure games. They're puzzles. Each chapter gives you items and clues you need to solve the final puzzle. Remove one chapter and you're missing pieces. The German censors basically took a jigsaw puzzle and threw away a quarter of the pieces, then handed it to the customers and said, have fun. The game became unwinnable. Not hard, not challenging, literally impossible to complete. German players could play through 4/5 of a horror game and then hit a brick wall because the items they needed to beat the final boss were sitting in the banned chapter they couldn't access. This created a really interesting situation. Germany had successfully removed the offensive content. Mission accomplished. They'd also successfully created the world's most expensive paperweight. The game couldn't be beaten, which meant players were stuck in an internal nightmare of incompletion, which, when you think about it, captures the spirit of the original story perfectly. The best part, nobody seemed to notice this problem until after the game was shipped. Customers bought a broken product. Stores sold a broken product. The ratings board approved a broken product. Everyone involved in this process apparently forgot that games are supposed to, you know, work and be able to be completed. This went on for years. German gamers who wanted to play the full version had to import it from other countries, or just accept that they'd bought an interactive art piece about the futility of trying to win. Very deep, very German. Eventually, in 2019, Germany relaxed their rules about Yahtzee symbols in games. Suddenly, the uncut version became legal. It only took them 24 years to figure out that maybe breaking games wasn't the best approach to censorship. But broken games were nothing compared to what happened next. Because in 1996, someone decided to market their point-and-click adventure game with the tagline, the most violent adventure game of all time. Bold choice. Most companies try to downplay the violence. These guys led with it. Mission accomplished, I guess. Harvester was supposed to be satire. Developers wanted to make fun of violent media by being so over the top that people would get the joke. Turns out, when you make a game about eating children and dismembering women in morgues, people don't always catch the humor. Weird how that works. The game takes place in some twisted version of 1950s America. You play as Steve, who wakes up with amnesia in a town called Harvest.
I always thought this was interesting that they actually, the type of games that they made back then was they actually took real people and made actual real scenes like in movies. Most of the game was, you know, point and click and, you know, all this sort of stuff, but there were scenes where there was actual real acting, real shit. I thought that when I first saw it, I thought it was a weird concept, but nowadays I believe it's like a very interesting concept to have in a game.
Sounds innocent enough. Then you start playing and realize the town's idea of family fun includes cannibalism, child murder, and graphic torture. The game featured scenes of kids getting killed and eaten, a woman getting chopped up in a morgue, and implied things where family members love each other too much, if you catch my drift. All presented with this weird, dark comedy tone that apparently nobody found funny. Here's the thing about satire. It only works if people understand you're making a joke. When your satire involves children dying, you've probably crossed into territory where the message gets lost. The developers thought they were being clever. Critics thought they were being sick. Guess who won that argument? Again, Germany took one look at this thing and said absolutely not. They banned it immediately. The game had numerous child death scenes, which even Germany's loose standards couldn't handle at the time. And Germany was pretty relaxed about violence in the 90s. So if they're saying no, you've really messed up. Australia refused to classify it. New Zealand banned it. The UK wouldn't touch it. not because the government stepped in, but because no publisher wanted to deal with the hassle. They looked at Harvester and decided their reputation wasn't worth it. Even in America, stores refused to stock it. The game got an M rating, which should have been fine, but when store managers actually saw what was in it, they backed out. Turns out there's a difference between violent and holy crap, what is wrong with these people violent. The most interesting part, the publisher went bankrupt. They made a game so controversial that nobody would sell it and acted surprised when they couldn't make money. The company literally ended itself trying to make the most violent adventure game ever. That is a pretty incredible achievement if you ask me. The whole situation created this weird catch-22. The game was too extreme for normal distribution, but it was also too obscure for anyone to get arrested over it, so it just disappeared. No high-profile court cases, no police raids, just a company that spent years making something nobody wanted to buy. You can still find copies if you really want to.
So wait, is it actually on Steam? Let's take a look. Let's see. Harvester. It is. It's actually on Steam. Oh my god. That is funny that it's actually on Steam. And it's got a very positive rating for both recent and all reviews. I can't, let's see, there is an actual negative review. The devs had some really dark demons they were dealing with. There's just some stuff that shouldn't be in a video game. Oh, yeah. Okay, so it actually is, that's funny that's actually on Steam.
People who hear about Harvester decide they're better off not knowing what all the fuss is about. Sometimes ignorance really is bliss. But something you shouldn't be ignorant about is that my dog, Flapjack, who you can see on screen now, is threatening to not let me post on my YouTube channel unless you hit the like and subscribe button. He literally is an abusive manager and he is holding me hostage here. Please, I need the good boy points so that I can continue posting on YouTube. Please do not be tricked by his cute face. This dog is evil. So yeah, maybe even more controversial is when someone decided to make a racing game where the whole goal was just to run over pedestrians. Just straight up vehicular manslaughter for points. You could win races 3 ways. Finish first, destroy all the other cars, or kill every single walking around. Most players picked option 3 because apparently driving in a straight line is boring when you could be scoring combos off of old ladies and school kids. Finally, they've made a video game for Marcus Brownlee. The game was called Carmageddon, and it was exactly what you think it was. Cars with chainsaws attached, blood splatter effects, pedestrians flying through the air. The whole thing was designed to be as offensive as possible while technically still being a racing game. They even added cows to the mix.
Oh my god.
Why limit yourself to just human targets? Most countries looked at this and did the usual dance. Rate it for adults, maybe change the blood color, call it a day. But Brazil decided to go nuclear. They didn't just ban the game, they went to court about it. A judge looked at Carmageddon and decided this was a public safety issue. The court ordered all copies surrendered to police, not returned to stores, not pulled from shelves, handed over to law enforcement officers, because apparently running over pixelated people was now a crime against the state. But wait, it gets better. Brazil decided that banning the game wasn't enough. They wanted to make sure this never happened again. So they came up with a punishment that was either brilliant or completely insane, depending on how you look at it. The Brazilian government told Brassoft, the game's distributor, that they had to produce an educational CD about safe driving and traffic laws, not as a separate project, as part of their punishment for distributing a murder car simulator. The company that brought Brazil a game about killing pedestrians now had to teach people how to properly yield at crosswalks. Think about that for a second. The same people who localized a game about scoring points for vehicular homicide were now responsible for creating educational content about not hitting people with cars. The irony was so thick you could drive a chainsaw-equipped race car through it. The court wasn't messing around with enforcement either. Stores that got caught selling Carmageddon faced fines of about $11,000 per day. That's not a slap on the wrist. That's we will financially destroy your business money. Most people don't even make $11,000 in a month, and Brazil was charging that every 24 hours. Brazil actually followed through on the educational CD requirement. They co-produced a driving safety course that taught proper traffic laws and responsible vehicle operation. The same company literally went from here's how to creatively murder people with cars to remember to use your turn signal, grandma, in the span of a few months. The educational CD was supposed to be ready by mid-1998, but there's no word on whether it included any bonus points for not hitting an old grandma. So yeah, other countries just banned games, but Germany has bigger plans because Sega looked at their new Wii game and decided to surrender before the fight even started. They had this black and white comic book violence fest called Mad World. Took one look at Germany's track record and just gave up. They didn't even try to submit it for rating. They just said nope and moved on with their lives. This is the corporate equivalent of seeing a test you know you're going to fail and deciding not to show up to class that day. Except instead of getting a 0, you get to avoid having your product confiscated by federal authorities. Smart move, honestly. Mad World was a game about a guy named Jack Kamen who has a chainsaw for an arm. He's competing in
Oh yeah, I remember this.
a game show called Death Wash, which is exactly what it sounds like. The whole city has been turned into a murder arena where contestants kill each other for points and prize money. Basically, it's like Hunger Games. The game was designed to look like a violent comic book, except everything was black and white except for the blood, which was bright red, very artistic, very stylized, very much focused on creative ways to kill people with power tools and street signs. You could impale enemies on traffic cones, throw them into jet engines, or use your chainsaw to solve most of your problems. Sega's marketing team probably looked at this thing and realized they had created something that German censors would hate. The game was literally built around scoring points for elaborate murders. The black and white art style wasn't gonna fool anyone. Violence is violence, even when it looks like a graphic novel. So they made a business decision. Why waste time and money submitting a game that was guaranteed to get banned? At this time in history, Germany's rating board had a very clear track record with ultra-violent games. They said no to everything that involved detailed human murder. Mad World was detailed human murder, the video game. The funny part is that other countries were fine with it. Australia gave it an MA15+ rating. The UK slapped an 18+ sticker on it and called it a day. But Germany's standards were different. They didn't care if it was stylized or satirical or artistically interesting. If you were rewarding players for creative killing, that was crossing the line. This created a weird situation where Germany effectively banned a game that was never officially banned. Sega just assumed it would get banned and didn't bother trying, which is self-censorship at the finest. German gamers who wanted to play Mad World had to import it from other countries, and then customs might seize multiple copies if they thought you were planning to distribute them. But one copy for personal use, that was probably fine. Germany's enforcement would focus on commercial distribution, not individual ownership. So while Germany was scaring publishers away, Britain actually stepped up their enforcement on another game because Rockstar Games achieved something special in 2007. They made the first video game banned in the UK in 10 years. And that's quite an accomplishment. Most companies struggle to make a game anyone remembers. These guys made one so disturbing that British censors broke a decade-long streak of saying yes to everything. The UK had been pretty relaxed about video games since 1997. They'd approved countless shooters, horror games, and violent adventures without a sweat. Then Manhunt 2 showed up, and suddenly the British Board of
Manhunt, yeah, that one was banned nearly around the freaking world.
Film classification remembered they were allowed to say no to things. Ireland went even further. They'd never banned a video game before, ever. Manhunt 2 was their first. Congratulations to Rockstar for having the only game on Ireland's banned list. That's gotta feel special. Like being the first person kicked out of a library that never had anyone kicked out of it before. The game was about Daniel Lamb, a guy who escapes from a psychiatric hospital with his split personality, Leo Casper. Together they fight through asylums and city streets, brutally murdering people with syringes, saws, and whatever else they can find. The game rewarded creative executions with better scores. Very educational. Take-Two, Rockstar's parent company, had an interesting defense strategy. Their chairman called Manhunt 2 not violent entertainment, not an action game, art. He said it was a fine piece of art that parents and consumers should be able to make their own choices about, because nothing says artistic expression quite like suffocating enemies with plastic bags for points. Now I understand it does, but it's just kind of funny to phrase it that way, you know? But the British censors weren't buying the art argument. They said Manhunt 2 had unremitting bleakness and callousness of tone, which is a very polite way of saying this game is up. They also mentioned the game's sustained and cumulative casual sadism, which sounds like something you'd hear in a psychology textbook about serial killers. Ireland's censors were more direct. They said the game had gross, unrelenting, and gratuitous violence, and that there was no context for it other than killing. At least they were honest and used normal words about what bothered them. No fancy language about artistic merit or cultural significance, just this is gross, we don't want it here. The whole situation put Rockstar in an awkward position. They'd spent years making a game they called art, and now they couldn't sell it in 2 entire countries. That's not great for business. Art doesn't pay the bills if nobody's allowed to buy it. Eventually, Rockstar edited the game. They blurred the execution scenes and removed the scoring system that rewarded brutal kills. The censored version got approved with an 18+ rating. Problem solved. Well, mostly solved. The uncut version remained banned, so anybody who wanted the full artistic experience had to import it from somewhere else. Germany also banned Manhunt 2 outright, but they were banning everything at this time, so that wasn't really news. The UK and Ireland bans were special because they almost never happened anymore, but banning games was nothing compared to threatening actual jail time, because Germany decided that selling Condemned 2 could get you up to a year in prison. Not a fine, not a warning, actual jail time for selling a video game. The same legal system that handles drug dealers and car thieves was now threatening to lock up GameStop employees for stocking the wrong stuff. This wasn't some empty threat either. German law treats banned media distribution as a serious criminal offense. 1 year behind bars for helping someone buy pixels that form violent images. That's a hell of a way to discourage people from selling it. Condemned 2 followed Ethan Thomas, an ex-FBI agent who's become an alcoholic while investigating serial murders in a decaying city. The game mixed crime scene investigation with brutal melee combat. You could beat enemies to death with pipes, bricks, or whatever you found lying around. Very therapeutic for stress relief, apparently. The game also features some of the most disturbing cutscenes ever put in a mainstream release. There's a scene where a character vomits blood directly into the protagonist's mouth. Not metaphorically, literally. Someone animated mouth-to-mouth blood vomiting and decided that belonged in their product. Quality entertainment for the whole family. I cannot wait to be a father and just get my kids playing this stuff. German authorities looked at this combination of realistic violence and gross-out horror and decided it crossed every line they had. Just banned it from stores, they added it to list B of indexed media. They had a Munich court officially confiscated. When a court confiscates your entertainment product, you know you've made some interesting creative choices. The confiscation meant retailers couldn't sell it, advertise it, or even display it. Authorities found copies on store shelves. The store owner could face criminal charges. Again, if you've seen a couple of my videos now, imagine having to explain to your cellmate that you're in prison because you sold someone a video game where you beat people up with a prosthetic limb. And what makes this extra weird was that Australia somehow approved Condemned 2 with an MA 15+ rating. Australia, one of the countries famous for banning everything that moves, looked at blood vomiting and torture museums and said, close enough to family friendly. Meanwhile, Germany was threatening prison sentences for the same content. The game's ads got banned in the UK too, which gives you an idea of how extreme the imagery was. British TV regulators saw the commercial and decided it was too graphic for broadcast. Keep in mind, this is the same country that airs Doctor Who, where people get turned into scarecrows and fed to monsters. If Britain thinks your violence is excessive, you've achieved something special. German gamers who wanted to play the uncut version had to import it from other countries and hope customs didn't notice. Again, like other games, importing one copy for personal use wasn't usually prosecuted, but getting caught with multiple copies could raise suspicions about distribution. The whole situation turned buying a horror game into a minor smuggling operation. Publishers typically just accepted these bans rather than fighting them in court. Writing costs money, and there's no guarantee of winning. It's easier to write off one market than risk legal bills. Now, while prison threats were extreme, some bans got surprisingly reversed because a German court ordered the physical confiscation of House of the Dead Overkill. Court officers had to actually go out and seize copies of a zombie shooting game from stores. Imagine being the police officer whose job that day was collecting video games about killing cartoon monsters. That's definitely not what you pictured when you joined law enforcement. House of the
I don't think I have that one. It's the one where you have to type out the words for it to shoot. I forget what that one's called.
Dead Overkill was an on-rail shooter designed to look like a cheesy 1970s horror movie. Everything was over the top on purpose. Fake film grain, deliberate bad dialogue, zombies that exploded into clouds of blood when you shot them. The whole game was basically a parody of B-movie horror films, complete with a soundtrack that sounded like it came from a drive-in theater. The game also held a Guinness World Record for the most F-bombs ever used in a video game. Most profanity in gaming history was apparently a selling point. After all, nothing says quality entertainment quite like record record-breaking amounts of swearing at cartoon zombies.
What's up, mother?
The German courts weren't impressed by the artistic merit of excessive swearing. They looked at all the blood and gore and decided this crossed their violence threshold. The fact that it was stylized didn't matter. The fact that it was clearly a joke didn't matter. Violence against human-like creatures was violence against human-like creatures, even if those creatures were obviously fake movie monsters. The confiscation order meant retailers couldn't sell or advertise the game. If authorities found copies in stores, the owners could face fines or prosecution. Managers had to hand over their inventory to law enforcement officers, who presumably had more important crimes to investigate than zombie video games. Here's where it gets interesting though. Australia, again the country famous for banning everything that moves, actually overturned their initial ban on appeal. Their reasoning was brilliant. They decided that the violence is so cartoonish and over the top that it couldn't possibly be taken seriously. The appeal board basically said this is too ridiculous to be harmful. Think about that for a second. Australia, which has banned games for having realistic blood effects, looked at a game with exploding zombie heads and said, it's obviously fake. Let it through. We finally have a breakthrough here. Meanwhile, Germany was sending officers to confiscate the same content from store shelves. The German ban lasted 9 years. That was 9 years of treating a zombie comedy game as contraband material. In 2018, they finally reevaluated it and decided that maybe confiscating cartoon horror games wasn't the best use of court resources. The uncut version finally became legal for adult purchase. So yeah, legal confusion was getting weird between countries, but modern bans focused on different problems. Because in 2020, Ellie kissed her girlfriend in a trailer, and several countries decided that was too dangerous for their citizens to see. Not the zombie apocalypse, not the graphic violence, not the hot buff girl, not the torture scenes or brutal combat, but two women kissing. That was a line they wouldn't cross. The Last of Us Part 2 disappeared from PlayStation stores in Saudi Arabia and the UAE before it even launched. No official announcement, no press release explaining why. The game just wasn't available for pre-order. Reddit users noticed first, which is probably not how Sony wanted to handle their marketing strategy. When people contacted PlayStation support to ask what happened, they got a very corporate response. The game was banned by the competent authorities of the country, or some other legal mumbo jumbo. That's a very polite way of saying the government told us no, and we're not going to argue about it. Very diplomatic, very unhelpful. The game features Ellie, who's openly gay, in a relationship with another woman named Dina. There's a scene in the E3 2018 trailer where they kiss at a dance. It's about 3 seconds long, very romantic, very normal, very good in the game, but the TV show ruined it. I don't even want to talk about the TV show. It's bad. But apparently it was very illegal in certain parts of the world. Again, it is 2018 to 2020 at this point. Two women kissing should not upset you. If it does, you need to go to therapy. I'm sorry. What's even crazier though is this wasn't even the first time Ellie's sexuality appeared in the series. The DLC for the original game shows her kissing another girl. It's actually a really good story. That content was available in the same countries without any problems, but somehow making it an essential part of the sequel crossed a line that the DLC didn't. The funny part is that plenty of violent games get released in those same markets. You can buy games about shooting people, stabbing enemies, and blowing things up, but two women who love each other, that's where they draw the line. Violence is fine, love is dangerous. The ESRB rating for The Last of Us Part 2 mentions nudity and sexual content, which some people thought might be the real reason for the ban, but other games with similar ratings were available for pre-order in the same stores. Cyberpunk 2077, which promised way more explicit content, was totally fine. The difference seemed to be that Cyberpunk's sexual content was focused on heterosexual stuff. Sony never officially explained this situation. They just quietly removed the game from certain regional stores and hoped nobody would make a big deal about it. PlayStation Arabia's Twitter account kept promoting the game's State of Play showcase, which was confusing. They were advertising something they weren't allowed to sell. Gamers in those countries had workarounds, of course. You could create accounts for other regions, buy digital gift cards online, or import physical copies from retailers who didn't care about local content laws. The ban mostly just made purchasing the game more annoying rather than impossible. The whole situation kind of shows how different countries handle LGBTQ content in media, and what is considered normal in like most of the world is contraband material elsewhere. Like literally a kiss scene that wouldn't get a second glance in America, Canada, or Europe was enough to ban an entire product in the Middle East. I don't know if you've played the game or not, but
Middle East is actually pretty strict on its same-sex stuff. Hell, you can get beaten for it.
But Naughty Dog, the developer, couldn't really edit the content out either, which other games have done in different situations, which I don't really agree with, because Ellie's relationship with Dina was like central to the entire story. You can't just remove the main character's love interest without rewriting everything. So yeah, modern content bans were complicated. But one game created our entire rating system actually, because Senator Joe Lieberman held a press conference to condemn a video game where the goal was to save teenage girls from vampires. He thought it was about harming them.
There was a graphic depiction of the violence against women with strong overtones of sexual violence.
This fundamental misunderstanding launched congressional hearings that created the entire video game rating system that we still use today.
I thought it was because of Mortal Kombat that the entire rating system was made. I didn't think it was a different game.
Sometimes the biggest changes in history happen because some old boomer in a government position didn't read the damn instructions. Night Trap was a cheesy B-movie horror game filmed with real actors. You played as a surveillance officer watching security cameras at a slumber party. It's like Five Nights at Freddy's. Oh my god, guys, he said it's like Five Nights at Freddy's. It's not like Five Nights at Freddy's. Your job was to protect the girls from vampiric creatures called augurs who wanted to drain their blood. When you saw an augur approaching, you triggered traps to capture it. You were the good guy, the hero, the protector. But Lieberman saw footage of girls in nightgowns and creatures that could drain their blood and assumed you were supposed to hurt the victims. He never actually played the game. He just watched random clips and decided this was teaching children to enjoy violence against women, which is the exact opposite of what the game asked you to do. The hearings in December 1993 became a corporate wrestling match between Nintendo and Sega. Howard Lincoln from Nintendo spent most of his time throwing Sega under the bus. He kept pointing out that Nintendo had rejected Night Trap while Sega had published it. Very noble, very convenient that Nintendo's system couldn't handle CD-ROM games at the time. Bill White from Sega tried to defend the game by explaining that it was meant for adults. Lieberman wasn't interested in that explanation. He already decided that video games were corrupting America's youth, and Night Trap was Exhibit A in his case against interactive entertainment.
But this game simply has no place in our society.
The best part was watching senators try to understand technology they'd clearly never used. These were people who probably need help setting their clock on their VCR. And now they were debating the social impact of interactive media. Byron Dorgan talked of the game encouraging players to trap women, which again was backwards. You trap the monsters to save the women.
Well, I saw the video game Night Trap for the first time. It is a sick, disgusting video game in my judgment. It's an effort to trap and kill women. Shame on people that produce that trash. It's child abuse in my judgment.
Lieberman introduced the Video Game Rating Act in February 1994. The bill would have created a government panel to rate games for violence and sexual content. The industry looked at this threat of federal regulation, decided they'd rather police themselves. So the Entertainment Software Rating Board, or the ESRB, launched in September 1994. So Night Trap, a game about rescuing people from movie monsters, accidentally created the ESRB. Every time you see an M rating or a T rating on a game box, you're looking at the legacy of senators who didn't understand what they were regulating. The system that rates Grand Theft Auto and Call of Duty exists because politicians got confused about a vampire rescue game. Hot take from Chupacabra here. If you were old enough to be drinking water when we had lead in it, you probably shouldn't be in the government anymore. The irony is perfect. A game designed to let players be heroes got treated as a villain simulator. Congressional hearings based on a complete misunderstanding of the product led to industry-wide changes that are still in effect 30 years later. Lieberman probably never realized he'd been arguing against a game where violence towards women was literally the fail condition. All of this to say that sometimes the most important legislation happens because the people writing it have no idea what the they're talking about. Those are 10 different video games that were banned throughout history that had legal repercussions on owning or playing. Let me know down in the comments what games I missed that you'd like me to talk about more in future videos, or let me know other video ideas you'd like me to do. As always, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this one. And if you enjoyed watching this video, you should watch the one on screen now because it'll be even better.
Yeah, I thought it was... I didn't realize it was Night Trap that was the reason that the ESRB was created. I honestly thought it was because of Mortal Kombat that the ESRB was created. Because Mortal Kombat was like the focal point of a lot of controversy back in the day. It was under attack by illegal legislation a lot. And I thought that was the reason the ESRB was created. Surprising to find out it's because of old heads.